public meeting to talk about the revaluation. I know that many of you have scheduled informal hearings, and I know a lot of you had some difficulty. I know there was a tremendous amount of people who scheduled informal hearings, and the municipal evaluation added an additional 2 weeks to allow for more people. I just want to say, though, at the onset, that all residents who want to have a hearing can schedule a formal hearing. And any resident who wants to schedule a formal hearing will be able to do that. I spoke to our tax assessor today, and he said we can extend the Board of Assessment Appeals to allow as many people in our town who want to, that will be able to do that. And so I do want to say, to start off by saying that I know a lot of people are frustrated and they have a lot of questions. We asked residents to write their questions in ahead of time, which Ross Murray and Municipal Evaluations have in writing, and they're going to go through each of the questions and then answer each one. Hopefully we'll have some time. We're going till 6:30. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end for follow-up questions. If not, people can email the tax assessor directly at rmurray, M-U-R-R-A-Y, at fairfieldct.org. I just want to say I put this in my newsletter for the last maybe 3 to 4 weeks, what the process is. There is a statutory obligation that towns have to have a reevaluation every 5 years. And believe me, I wouldn't have chosen this year during a global pandemic to have one if it's not statutorily obligated. This process went through our purchasing department and had an RFP. There were companies that applied for it, and Municipal Evaluations won the RFP process. Then that came before the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen voted to approve. And then we all know how how their process went from there. I just want to mention that this is also being streamed on Fair TV, so that residents who didn't have an opportunity to get on or participate can watch it after, so that maybe some of their questions, and we do have a whole host, a lot of questions. So I am going to, Mr. Fazio from Municipal Evaluations is on the call as well, and Ross Murray, our tax assessor, is on. And we're going to go through the list of questions. And, well, Ross, I'm going to turn it over to you. I don't see. Who's on? Ross, are you on? Are you on mute? Ross? Ross, I think you're muted. No one can hear. I can't hear you.
There we go. I tried to unmute it before and it wouldn't go, but can you hear me now?
Yes. So I'm going to hand this over to you, and you're going to go through the list of questions and answers, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end. We are stopping at 6:30, but hopefully we'll get to that point.
Okay. As Brenda said, the revaluation is state mandated. We have to do one every 5 years. In the past, back in the 90s, there were times where towns did not do them, and they have tightened up the statute, so it is quite difficult not to perform a reval every 5 years. The reason we perform a reval is to equalize the values amongst throughout the whole town. So as different areas rise or fall in value over that 5-year period, the reval is meant to readjust that and bring properties back into equity. Our tax system is ad valorem, it's based on value, so that's why it's important to get properties back and equalize them. Our last reval was in 2015, and it's what we refer to as a full reval. That just means that all the houses were inspected and an attempt was made to inspect them and measure them. We do that once every 10 years, so this reval did not include that sort of inspection. And as you know, Municipal Valuations was selected through the RFP process. We had 4 companies submit RFPs to that. Municipal Valuations was selected. They were also the low bidder in that process. The process for the reval will actually get answered in the questions. So I think I'm going to jump into the questions that were submitted. First question is, why do some properties that have deeds that read from mean high water to mean high water not have a visual appraisal card for their creekside properties while most others do? A couple of examples were provided. 1662 Fairfield Beach Road, that property is a condominium. We've had some questions on another property, I think a different one that's also a condo. Condos do not have a separate land line. It is the value of that land or that location is reflected through the value of the condo. So there's no separate land. The land is held under common ownership. 1601 was another example for that question. That piece, the deed reads that it is 2 pieces, and it is bound by Long Island Sound and the creek. 1681, the deed reads, it indicates that it is a 1 piece of property. It does not show a break for the street. So in a nutshell here, some of the properties have deeds that list 2 parcels, a beachside and a creekside. Some of the deeds read all the way through. So there is a difference in how the deeds have been recorded over the years. I don't have a definitive reason for why some of them were combined. I suspect that in the past, the office combined them potentially due to a request. Second question is, what is the methodology the reappraisal company used to determine valuations for the creekside properties that are part of beachside deeded properties? And the simple answer is we look at the sales. Mike, you want to provide a little more on that?
Sure. So when we looked at Fairfield Beach Road, some properties have lots across the street on the creek side, and then there's some beachside properties that just have properties on Long Island Sound side. The market is indicating through the sales that if you own a piece of property on the beach side and the creek side, which allows access to the creek or additional parking or a garage, that the market is indicated that a higher price is being paid for those houses. And that's how we reflect that in the market analysis when doing the revaluation.
And we also, on those types of properties, look at it as a whole. Well, you know, you will, if the property's sold, we'll look at that sale price and put those 2 parcels together. Next question is, how does the town get the right to tax docks when they're in state waters? Well, what we're doing by adding the docks is we're picking up the value that is being added to the parcel for having the dock and the ability to put a dock in. You know, we also have some houses that are projecting out over the mean high water mark, and we pick those entire houses up as well. Why do the valuations of creekside properties of equal size and use differ? Shouldn't they be the same if they have the same use or the capability of the same use? Structures are valued separately to determine the total valuation. There was a bunch of examples given for this one. And what really I saw here is that the differences they're seeing are due to a rounding issue. when you look at vision appraisal, it displays an acreage value, and the acreage is rounded to a similar number, even though the square foot value is different. And in our system, we use square foot for the primary lot. So even though many of these properties are listed as 0.02 acres, the actual square footage varies, and that's what's creating the differences. There's also a couple of properties that were located in different sections of the beach where we've identified that there's a differing value. Why do beachside portions of one's deed receive a different land valuation? I think this was due to the attempt to calculate a square foot value. So if you simply divide the value by the square feet or the acreage and come up with a value, it's going to look astronomical on a very small lot. And the reason for that is land is valued on a curve. So a piece of land is going to have a value. A building lot will have a value. But as it gets larger, it doesn't grow proportionately in value. The example I always give is if you have two lots side by side and they're both in a half-acre zone, and one lot's a half acre and the other is 0.99, and the 0.99 cannot be subdivided, the 0.99 will not be worth twice as much as the 0.5, and the 0.5 won't be worth half as much as the 0.99. The larger lot will be worth more, but not proportionately. Why are beachside lots of equal size that have residents on them receiving different valuations? It would seem that there should be consistency there. This again is an issue where they were looking at not seeing the square footage that we use, they were seeing the acreage that was displayed on the Vision site. If a resident is being taxed on their portion of an acre, why is it inappropriate to divide the portion of the acre into the valuation to understand the per acre valuation the appraiser is using in their valuations? It goes on, but the essence of that is the same thing. That is attempting to look at land as if it was valued on a linear basis, and it's not. It's on a curve. So larger properties are going to be worth more, but not in proportion to the value of a smaller lot. You can't just divide and then multiply it out. That concept of a land curve is widely used throughout the state and pretty much anywhere mass valuations are taking place. The revaluations were done during the pandemic and prices in the beach area may have been inflated. Residents will suffer financial ramifications from the higher evaluations for 5 years and may never recover the loss during the resale down the road. Can it be delayed and houses reassessed after COVID-19? Again, the state statutes tell us we have to do a reval every 5 years, and the ability to not do that is severely limited. It really takes an extraordinary event to not do that, and the pandemic will not qualify for that.
Ross, can I just, it's Brenda.
Yeah.
Can I just interject that I think that the Board of Assessment Appeals should take into consideration the potential for COVID having an impact on some of the values.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving along, we have what is the definition of FEMA compliant? Some houses are listed as FEMA compliant on marketing tools for sale of the home, but is not listed as FEMA compliant on the Vision card. Since 2013, any house that's been built had to meet the FEMA guidelines. They're rather complex, and they vary depending on where you are and the house. So I really can't provide a complete definition here. but anything built after 2013 or raised after 2013 would be considered compliant. Prior to that, we'd have to check with our planning and zoning department, and they would let us know if the house meets guidelines or not. How did you gauge the value of homes right on the water versus those 10 blocks away? What was the formula? For example, I'm trying to compare my home to a similar home that has one more bedroom or one more bathroom. How does that reflect the appraisal? Well, the pricing model that we developed is completely based on sales. And we use sales from throughout the town to develop the entire model, and then, local sales to fine tune it for local properties. When you're looking for the best comps, you want to find similar homes. And the best way I can describe a similar home is, think about if you were purchasing your house today. When you look at the sales, is that a house you would also consider if you were looking to buy? Do you think that house, that the comp is a little better than yours? Do you think it's a little less than yours? And once you have a couple of comps, you can usually get a sense of where your value should fall. Is yours better than all the comps, worse than all the comps, or somewhere in the middle? And those comps should steer you to a range of value. Several people have asked for the algorithm. It's not something we can publish. It's much too complex to lay out. Back when we had paper field cards, we probably could have done that for you, but we're now in a computer age, and the model has, the methodology has gotten much more complex with the ability of computers. So there's many factors in there. There's many ways that the data is used to come up with the values. What's really important and what everybody should always focus on is the final value. That's what's important. So you need to ask, is that final value representative of the value of my home on October 1st of 15? And if it's not, then find those comps and let us take a look at them.
Russ, I think you meant 2020.
Okay, yeah, I did mean 2020. Please explain why some homes are appraised above the purchase price of the home. The revaluation process is statistical in nature. So we take all the sold properties and develop the pricing model, and we use some statistics to analyze the validity of what the model is producing for values. So what we expect is to have properties on either side. You're not going to have all the sales come out exactly on their sale price. You will have some that are over and under, and so long as that distribution is fairly tight, it's considered valid. And one of the key ratios we use is called coefficient of dispersion, and it is a measure of just that. And the standard is 15, and I believe last time I checked we were right around 8. Anything below 10 is considered very good. Please give examples of the extras that might impact the appraised value of a home. When you look at your field card, most of the elements that you see on there will have an effect on value to some degree. Not all do, but most. So bedrooms, bathrooms, siding, flooring, location, size of the land, size of the house, all of those things will have an effect.
Also, all
I'm sorry?
Also, all the outbuildings, if you have garages.
Correct, outbuildings.
Pools.
Correct. Finding comparables is difficult given the unique features of homes. No two homes in the beach area are likely to be exactly the same. Please give an example of what you consider to be comparable homes and how you appraise the different features of each. Please enumerate the factors taken into consideration. So I think I answered that earlier. You're looking for a comparable home. If you were looking to buy a home on the beach, and your house was one of them, and what other comps that you see would you consider? And then you need to make your judgment as to, are those comps better or worse, and where does yours fall in there? I don't have an exact number to give you for the difference between a bedroom and a bathroom. So you really need to look at those comps and make the judgment is would you pay more for the comp or less, and what does that lead you to a value for your house? Is square footage of a home one of the determinations on revaluation? If the appraised square footage of my home is substantially different from that of another comparable home, do you take that into consideration? Yes, square footage is one of the components used in the valuation. But again, it's just one of the components. Please explain why land parcels of equal size in the same neighborhood, and in some cases right next door to one another, are appraised differently. This was specific to Robson Place. You know, lots that are non-conforming, they're what we would call legal non-conforming. They're, if you have a house on them, it is a building lot. And even though it's non-conforming, it still has a house on it, and it still supports that. And to the best of my knowledge, you'd be able to rebuild that house even if it was a loss. What else we got here? In looking for comparables, can any house in the beach area be considered, or is there a certain radius within which comparables can be considered? You can use any house on the beach. You're just, again, looking for that house that you think offers similar utility, is similar to your house. It does not need to be exact. Again, think in terms of, if you couldn't buy your house, would you buy that comparable house? How old can a certified...
The other thing, Ross, that I'd like to mention is when you're purchasing houses directly on the beach, there's different categories. There's houses that are older, that aren't raised, they're not FEMA compliant, and then there's brand new houses that have been raised, they're all redone, they're built in the last 10 years. Typically, you're not going to adjust a brand new house versus one of the older beach houses that are not raised. So you're looking at categories of homes also when you're looking on the beach, or styles.
Like, how old can a certified appraisal paid for by the homeowner be considered acceptable? How old can an appraisal be to be considered acceptable as supporting document?
If you want, I could answer
Mike,
this.
I mean, we've talked about this.
So our appraisal firm, we've been in appraisal business for 35 years here. Also, we have an appraisal company as well as the revaluation company. We do individual appraisals for bank appraisals and other uses. Appraisals, if you had them done within the last 5 years, are good for informational purposes. We like to take a look at them to make sure that all the characteristics that is on the field card is matching what is actually in the house. Appraisals that have been done in the last year or two are better than appraisals that have been done 5 years ago because they reflect what the current market conditions are at the present time. If you just had your house appraised for refi within the last 6 months or a year, those are the best appraisals to send in. Or if you had an appraiser come out and take a look at it just for this purpose. We get a lot of appraisals that they hire an appraiser, they come out to take a look at it as a 10/1/2020, they send in the comps. Those appraisals are also very helpful. But you really don't need to hire an appraiser to send comps in. Most people today use the internet. They know of the sites out there that have Realtor.com, Zillow. All these sites have the sales, as well as the assessor's office has a list of all the sales that we've used. And you could plot them, you know the neighborhood, to look for similar sales, comparing to your house, adjust them based on square footage, and make a similar adjustments compared to your house. Is your house nicer condition? Is it worse condition? Is it larger? Is it smaller? Do you have more bathrooms, less bathrooms? All those type of adjustments, you make pluses and minuses, and you could kind of get an idea of what your house is worth if you never had an appraisal done in the last few years.
Thanks, Mike. Please enumerate the steps residents need to take and timing of the process as we move forward. Should they question the revaluation of their home? Well, hopefully you've all taken advantage of an informal or have one scheduled. We are running out of time on that informal process, but that doesn't stop your ability to challenge the assessment. The next step after the informals is the Board of Assessment Appeals. The only difference with the board is you have to file an application for the appeal by February 19th of 2021. The applications will be made available towards the end of the month. You simply fill that out and submit it to my office, and we will get you scheduled for an appointment with the BAA. The BAA will hear those appointments in March. And right now, we're anticipating those will all be done virtually. If you go to the BAA, you typically will sit with one of the representatives on the board. They have upped the number of people this year to 9. So instead of the normal 5 members, they have 9 to hear for the hearing. So you'll present your case to one member, and then the board will meet as a group with a quorum to make the final decision. And typically the person that heard your case will present the information that you gave to them. Then the board votes, and you will be notified, I believe, about a week after they make that decision, and they hopefully will wrap up at the end of March. So you should all hear by the very end of March or very beginning of April. After the BAA, the option is to go to Superior Court. To go to Superior Court, you do need to have been through the BAA. So if you think it'll go that far, you do need to go to the BAA. You can't just jump to Superior Court. Once you get to Superior Court, it's obviously a little more formal process. It is with a judge, and typically the judge tries to arbitrate the decision, and we all try to reach a settlement. We have a new judge that's hearing most of these cases, and he is looking for appraisals, and the appraisal that you would bring to court would have to be dated 10/1/20.
Ross, before we continue, I see some questions coming over the chat. I just wanted to address, there was one that was asked about, are they being penalized for homes that, by making homes FEMA compliant? Nobody's being penalized for making their home FEMA compliant. What it does is, once you're a house that's FEMA compliant versus a house that's not FEMA compliant, the market reflects more value. People are interested in having FEMA compliant homes versus non-compliant FEMA homes, especially in the beach area, due to the fact of flooding. Flood insurance is another major factor. So you're not really being penalized. The market is reflecting a benefit to your property value by having a FEMA compliant home.
I'm on a call. Sorry, I just had to close my door. Let's see. What is the town's official definition of appraised value of a home, and how does it differ from market value? Market value and appraised value are really used interchangeably, and market value is what a willing buyer will pay and a willing seller will sell for. Please explain the process for revaluing homes in steps. Well, the same process from prior revaluations followed. The process we follow is essentially the process that's been followed for probably decades. So it starts with the listing of all homes, and that listing process, started long ago. It started with paper field cards, and it has moved now into, computer field cards in our CAMA system. The cards are updated all the time. We update them when we see permit activity. We do our best to review sales and listings and pick up changes from that. As I mentioned, the last time we did a full measure and list was in 2015. We reviewed sales from January of 19 through spring of 20 initially to start the process. We only use what is considered a valid sale, so something like a foreclosure or a family transfer where maybe the selling price doesn't reflect the full value. Those are not used. In the midsummer, the model, we had sufficient sales and they were reviewed. We started producing values and, refining the results. And this is at the point where we created the new neighborhoods that were done. In mid-November, we had all the sales entered through October 1st, and we refined the model to use just the sales from October 1 of 19 through October 1 of 20, and that's the one-year period of the revaluation. And that refinement continued right through December until the notices were sent. Sales after October 1st were looked at, but they're not included in the pricing model, but we use those to gauge where the market is going. And once we were satisfied with the results, the notices were published and sent. How long was the process and how many people worked on the reporting and data? Was most of the work done the result of computer analytics? We started in January of 20, and Mike, you said there was about 5 to 10 people at various times working on the project?
Right, we had about 5 to 10 people working on the project. This was a statistical revaluation, or what they call statistical revaluation, so we weren't visiting every property and doing inspections. We did have a team out throughout the town taking new photos of every property. All the valuations were done by myself and my partner, Chris Karen. The hearings, we have a team of employees that are conducting the informal hearings at this time. I believe there's probably about 7 or 8 people answering the phones and doing hearings at this time. We do work in multiple towns, so depending on what day that you give a call, you could get different people. But throughout the process, we had 5 to 10 people working on the project. However, the main players were the 2 partners of the company setting all the values, along with the assessor's office, who had an integral part in this process.
Were the 2015, the last revaluation assessments of homes, each independently reviewed for accuracy, high and low, before the process began? They weren't necessarily reviewed one by one, but having worked with them over a period of time, we knew there was areas that we felt could be improved, and that's, but they don't have any influence on the new valuation. What assumptions were used to calculate percentage gains in certain market areas? Who discussed these assumptions before they were used? This is something that's important to keep in mind. We don't develop a percent change and apply it. The percent change is a result of the revaluation. It just tells you what happened through the building of the pricing model. So that only shows us what happened in the, the map that you saw from the Board of Selectmen. that just gives a sense of where values went up and down. It's not, those values aren't, the percentages aren't used to increase or decrease properties. Were local realtors consulted, and if so, for what purpose? Mike?
We did consult many local realtors in conversations. I consult with local realtors all the time, as not only do we do revaluations, we do fee appraisal work for banks and attorneys throughout the state of Connecticut. Like I said before, we've been in business for 35 years. I've been in Fairfield all my life. So we're very familiar with the real estate market in this town.
When were new market areas created and why? Who gave this authority? I believe this question refers to the neighborhoods that were created, and they were created as a result of the process, and they were done to refine the pricing model. And that decision is made, you know, between the revaluation company and myself. Were recent sales over the last 1 month to 1,000 days referenced for homes that recently sold? Were they referenced again at the end of the analysis to ensure accuracy? Not quite sure of this question, but the final results were based on sales from October 1 of 19 through October 1 of 20. That's the period of time that and the sales that we used in the revaluation. Who reviewed the new appraisal and assessment data before it was submitted and loaded to the Vision Appraisal website and mailed to the public? Did the first selectwoman get a chance to review it first? If not, this may be a good idea going forward.
Ross, I'll just jump in that,
yes. Thank you.
To answer that. Municipal evaluations and the tax assessor gave a presentation to me and my administration after it was completed, explained it to us, how they did it, what they did. We didn't know what valuations individual homeowners had, just what the process was and that they were completed, and we talked about when we would send out the postcards to individuals. Then they made a similar or exact same presentation to the Board of Selectmen so that they could understand it as well. And then we made sure that that was taped on Fair TV and that residents knew about it. And we've actually shared that link several times, or maybe about a dozen times at residents so they could hear about the process a little bit more, if that answers the question.
Thank you. What is the process for curing low assessments? How many assessments do you project to be low and high over 20%? I don't have a projection for how many are low or high. As I've mentioned, there's always going to be outliers in the statistics. What we're seeing is that our numbers are good. You know, that coefficient of dispersion I talked about is at 8%. It's very good, but it doesn't mean you're not going to have ones that fall way outside of that. We call them outliers. Those are going to happen. It's part of the process, and if we learn something about the property that we didn't know, we'll correct it, and that can either raise or lower the value.
Ross, before you continue, I see a lot of
Sure.
questions that are coming over through the chat. I'll try to get to them at the end of your presentation or our presentation. I'll answer the majority of them as long as they're not have to do with property specific questions. So I know that if people are getting anxious that we're not addressing them as we're going along, that I'll try to go through the majority of them at the end of the process and give answers.
Right. Yeah, well, I think as we stated in the onset, we wanted to get through the questions that were put up first, and then we'll get to the questions through the chat when we get done with these. Did you reference recent data and independent files from planning and zoning, recent permits, closed or still open, but with COs pending. Not so much planning and zoning, but we do review every single building permit that comes through. And that is a monumental task each year. There's a tremendous amount of activity in Fairfield. We look at all the permits. We, when they're CO'd, we put them on as complete. If it's completed after October 1st or it's not complete on October 1st, we will list it as partially complete and put it as a percentage complete of what the property will be. So we do this every year, even in a non-reval year. Was every single house and parcel reviewed independently for appraisal accuracy? I think they're asking if there was a third party, and no, there's not a third party that comes in and reviews, you know, all the 21,000 parcels in town. How many requests for appointments to challenge assessments have you received to date, and how does this compare to last cycle? Where are homeowners requesting appointments mostly concentrated? Mike, I'm going to toss this over to you. I know we talked about it earlier, but I think you said you had about 900 parcels, and
We had about
something less.
Right, we have about 900 parcels that we've had hearings on or scheduled to be heard. The appointments are a little less than that because some people have multiple parcels, especially when it gets to the commercial property owners. A lot of times they own multiple properties and schedule one appointment, but have 5 or 6 properties. But overall, it's about 900 parcels.
And I unfortunately don't have how many informals were in the previous years. I can tell you that as far as the BAA goes, there was 350 in 2015 and about 550 in the 2010 revaluation. The fear is the revaluation was based primarily on homes sold during the pandemic when there will be bidding wars on houses in our community. This potentially has an undue influence on evaluations. The revaluation is based on sales from October 1st, 19, again, through October 1st of 20. That's the requirement of revaluation. So if the market is up, we do pick up that increased value. But I don't think we've seen the peak yet. We're seeing sales after October 1st that are showing things are climbing still. As neighbors compare their reassessments, they are confused as percentages of increase are over the map, even on the same street. The query is, I guess, as to what the constant metric for equalization. This again is a case where you really shouldn't be using percent increase to make comparisons. You need to compare the final value. That's what is most important, is what is that final number, and is that final number accurate? What's the definition of a comparable home? I think we've covered that. Again, it's what would be a reasonable substitute for your house. What algorithms were used by municipal evaluation services, giving residents some rationale to compare their home to another? Is it square footage? Is it land size? Number of bedrooms? Number of bathrooms? Fireplaces? It's all of those. There's no algorithm that we can publish. I can't give you the plus and minus. Again, it's inherent in our CAMA system, and it's rather complex.
Well, so at the end of the job, and when we turn over the file to the town, we will also be turning over a manual, which is the revaluation manual. And within that manual, there will be the values of each individual component. That is the average value of each individual component. Now, these values are adjusted based on grade and age and depreciation for each individual house, but that will be available to the public. They will be able to take a look at it once the job is complete and you sign the grand list, at that point, we're able to produce this manual, which we will be turning over to the assessor's office.
Right, and that manual can't be produced until we're finalized.
Correct.
You noted that this is not an appraisal, as in an appraisal for resale value, but on the Town of Fairfield information hearing form, the resident is asked if they had a real estate appraisal on their property in the last 5 years. You suggest 2 or 3 comps, keep it simple. They will, but what are the factors for comparison? Residents feel they are shooting in the dark. Again, this is, you want to find a house that you would consider buying if you did not own the house you do. So you're looking for that substitute house. What definition did municipal valuation services use for FEMA compliant? There are homes that sold that the vision card does not state FEMA compliant, but the online market, did we read that one already, Mike?
I think we
covered
touched that before. It's a repetitive question.
I think I paged up by mistake. Is there or can there be a cap on how much the value can go up at any reval if there were no major improvements done between revaluation? Is that something that can be done, and if so, who sets it? Board of Finance? No, there's no statutory authority to cap increases, and that authority would have to come through the state statutes. Do they factor in the new tax collection into the price of the house? Meaning if the taxes on a property go from $28,000 to $35,000 based on the new revaluation, that would arguably make a house less attractive. We do not. We're using a sales comparison model. I mean, the pricing model we build is based on sales, and there's no way of knowing how the market will react and to what extent that reaction would be.
Even with that argument, Ross, if it was conversely the opposite and we were in the down market as we were in the crash of 2008 to 2010, you wouldn't artificially raise those values because the assessments were going lower.
How many this is to you, Mike, how many residential property appraisals have you done in the town of Fairfield in the last 2 years and in the last 5 years in the town of Fairfield?
Well, like I stated before, in the last 2 years, we've probably appraised over 100 properties in town for different purposes, as of estates or bank appraisals, of refis, purchases. In the last 5 years, there's hundreds. As I stated prior, we've been in business in Fairfield for 35 years. Over that time, we've appraised probably close to 1,000 properties individually.
And do you do full physical residential property appraisals for banks on purchase and refinances?
Yes.
If the assessor's slide presentation to the board included a breakdown of neighborhoods showing the percentage of increases and decreases, which was 19% on either end, up and down, how is it possible that many properties were increased by 34%? Where do these properties fit into the slide presentation? The slide that's in reference is the average for a particular neighborhood, and that average is made up of all the changes of all the properties. So you will always have ones that are above and below that average number. Why are small non-conforming lots subject to the same formula of increase as the 2 biggest lots on the street? Both of those properties have been expanded. I don't have the street name, unfortunately. The ability to expand is extremely challenging. It requires many variances. Setbacks are tight. The biggest lot on the street is double the size of the smallest, and yet they are subject to the same land assessment increase. What is the justification? Again, we're looking at this person was looking at percent increases, and what you need to focus on is the final value. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about non-conforming lots and the value and how that's looked at?
So with non-conforming versus conforming lots, that goes based on zoning. Some lots were developed and the lot lines were developed prior to the current zoning regulations being put in place. That doesn't mean that these lots are no longer building lots. What they are is they're non-conforming lots. The house that's there is on the piece of property, and we're valuing what is there right now. We're not looking at some hypothetical that could be built or may be built in the future. We're looking at valuing what's there today. If you have a house on a lot and there is some surplus land, that surplus land isn't going to be valued at the same rate as the house lot. And Ross gave a nice example before. If you have two lots and they're next door to each other and one's 0.11 and the other one's 0.15, that extra 0.04 tenths of an acre isn't going to be valued at the same rate as the house lot rate. It's excess or surplus land rate. It does add a little bit more value. People will pay a little bit more to have extra yard or extra land, but they're not going to pay the same rate as if they could build another house on the property. So that's what conforming versus non-conforming lots are. A lot of the lots down in the beach area, some of them have conforming and non-conforming issues. However, we're looking at what is currently built on the property and what the lot is being used for.
Okay.
Does that go for FEMA compliant versus non-compliant?
So with FEMA compliant and non-FEMA compliant, it doesn't have to do with the land. That has to do with the structures on the land. So if the house has been raised and it's FEMA compliant at the time of the revaluation, those homes are more valuable, everything else being equal, than non-FEMA compliant houses, because it does offer the ability to get a lower flood insurance, and if there is a disaster and another flood, most likely the house will not be impacted. So buyers in the market, if you had a choice between everything else being equal, they would take a FEMA compliant house versus a non-FEMA compliant house, and they're paying a slight premium for that.
Okay. Is the land appraisal portion of the overall property appraisal based on a formula? What is that formula? Is the value equal to the size of the property multiplied by the value per acre? We've pretty much talked about this. Land is valued on a curve. Most of the value of land comes in whether it is a building lot or not. So if you have a building lot, that is going to contribute greatly to its value. Anything beyond that is going to add value, but not at the same rate. If a significant portion of the landowner's property is subject to a conservation easement or inland wetlands where the property is required to be kept in its natural condition, meaning the landowner cannot build or otherwise improve on the property, why is that land included in the calculation of the value of the land, since the landowner does not have the right to use that portion of the land? The conserved portion still contributes to the value. It in many cases is going to be part of creating a building lot. And
I'm
it's
sorry.
Needed.
Yeah, this is my question.
That space
That's actually
that,
can you hear me? That's actually not true. Once it's a conservation easement, that cannot be taken away from the land.
So it's not part of the parcel any longer?
It's part of the parcel, but it's not usable and it can't be, it's forever a conservation easement on the deed of the property.
Right, but what
But
we're,
the house has, the property has a house on it.
Correct.
so like what I was saying before, to answer the question, we're appraising the property with a building lot with a house on it. All the extra land or surplus land, the value of that surplus land doesn't really add a lot to the overall value. And if you have conservation easements or you have wetlands, typically the market isn't looking at those factors when they're purchasing the property. They're
Oh, absolutely.
and
I absolutely disagree. That is not true.
so
Conservation easements. I have a neighbor whose lot is almost
right.
twice as big as mine, and his is appraised less because he doesn't have. And I have a conservation easement where half of my lot is unusable.
Right. So, and that's what I was getting to. If there's huge wetlands that impacts the usability of a piece of property, then a factor should be applied to those lots. And if you have an informal hearing, you could bring that up and we'll see if a factor has been applied or should be applied to those lots. This is what we were talking about in the beginning. Look at your field cards. Make sure that the physical characteristics of your house, of your lot are reflected on there. If there's a huge amount of wetlands, and I'm not talking about just a small little piece of wetlands in the corner or a small conservation easement that doesn't impact the usability of the lot.
Would a third of the lot countify as significant?
Well, I would have to look at case by case, and the best thing for you to do is, if you have an informal hearing, send in the survey map, and if you have a survey map, and let me look at and when I say me, eventually they all get to me, the complex ones. The hearing person will take the notes and the email and pass it on to me, especially if it's got to do with easements or conservation easements, and I'll take a look at it to see if it impacts the property, in my opinion, and if it's already been reflected on the field card. Is if it hasn't been reflected already and it does impact it, there's no reason why we wouldn't make that change now on the field card, because we want to have the best information going forward for the town and for yourself. Because if you go to sell the property, or if somebody down the line wants to see how it was valued, we could say, oh, yes, in the future, we did take into consideration this easement or the impact of the wetlands because it covers a majority of the lot. And I can't build anything in the backyard. I can't put a swimming pool. I can't put in a garage. And I agree that those are cases that need to be considered.
Okay.
Is there a name for that type of adjustment?
It's, if you're looking on the field card, a lot of times there'll be little notes that says wetlands and there's a condition adjustment. You'll see most field cards have a 1, but if you ever see like a 0.9 or a 0.8, it means there's some kind of impact to the land that's out of the ordinary. Most properties are at a 1, but if you see something less than a 1, there's usually some type of reasoning why that is, and it might well as be wetlands. And especially down in this area, you're seeing a lot of not as much conservation easements, but you're seeing a lot of wetlands, and you're seeing the conservation easements, not along Fairfield Beach Road, but up into the other, like Lolly Boulevard and Rolling Road. There's some conservation easements in the back over there where there is non-tidal wetlands.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Ross, I wanted to say to you, because I live on Fairfield Beach Road, and between me and Vets Park is all wetlands. So 2/3 of my lot is wetlands. And I went to the assessor's office, showed them my map. They agreed, and they charge your taxes at a much lower rate on the wetlands portion of your land. So you need to go to the assessor's office and get that conservation easement recorded on your assessment.
Right, as Mike was
Right.
saying, these need to be looked at individually to judge the impact.
Right, a good portion of your land was rated at, like a very low rate, because of that, it being wetlands and unusable. So that's a perfect example where we have on the field card, that delineation.
Where do you find your field card?
Uh, It's online at, what's the website?
Link is on my
BGSI.com,
website.
Fairfield.
Okay.
It's
Why are
vision
creekside lots of similar size to beachside lots appraised at a higher value per square foot when beachside lots are clearly more valuable than creekside ones? Again, this is a comparison of land on a per acre basis and doesn't take into consideration that we're using a land curve. Did I go the wrong way? No. Let's see. First, why did beach area land go up so much more than the rest of town? How do you determine that? The simple answer is we're looking at sales to determine value. Do you want to talk a little bit, Mike, about developing land values in the absence of, a number of land sales?
Right, so the way we come up with land value is there's multiple methodology that's acceptable appraisal practices. In mostly developed areas, because there isn't true vacant land sales, we have to look towards tear down sales. We also do what's called land extraction from improved property sales. These land extraction, the way that's done is you take off the value of the depreciated improvements, and you coming up with a land value. Within the CAMA system, there's a function in there that allows me to take a look at that and to make sure that the land value. But along Fairfield Beach Road and in the beach area, there's a sufficient amount of sales, of tear downs that allowed me to come up with land values.
Okay, how do you justify values going up 30% and higher for existing homes and land when the market has not gone up 30%? There was no examples given on this item, but Fairfield Beach, we indicated went up 17.4% on average. And, there's going to be properties that go up more and less than that number. And again, back to the same thing, it's based on what we see in the market, based on the sales.
Okay, that was my question, and that's not true because on our Facebook page, which is the Fairfield Neighborhood and Neighbors, every single response was it went up 20% to 45%. So you are incorrect. And to justify huge increases in the Fairfield Beach area, over 30% for most of us, you're not being accurate when you say it was 17%.
Well, I'm just going by what I had from my data, and I don't know how accurate Facebook posts would be. I don't think you're going to have a complete set of data. I don't think you'll have a complete set of data.
The other
No, but
thing you
when
have
you
to
say
look
it's
at-
a couple of homes or one home or two homes that may be out of the range, I'm just saying I'm disagreeing with you. It is more than just a couple of homes outside the curve. The whole beach area, Creekside or Beachside, have gone up 30% or more.
But it's a reflection of what the real estate market is doing. We're valuing things based on what buyers and sellers are agreeing to prices for their homes. We're not just applying a rate to everybody's house and picking it out of the air. Each house is put into the model and the model spits out a value, but these values are based on the sales. So people are coming in, purchasing houses people are selling their homes, they're agreeing on a price, and then those sales are used within the model. For us to check the model, we run the model, and then the model will come out with a value of the sales. And as long as it's close to the sales price, and our coefficient of dispersion is around 8, which is a very good, and what the coefficient of dispersion is, it's kind of like the bell curve. And the bell curve is narrower, the better, wider, it means that the data is not as good. The state requires 15, we're at half of that. So that means the data and the values are coming in very close to what the sales prices are. They're never going to be perfect because the real estate market isn't perfect.
But don't you feel that it's taxation without representation in the beach area because we're carrying the brunt of the town's reevaluation increase?
No, because that's where the values are changing. It's just a reflection of what the real estate market is doing. If you went to sell your house, you're not going to say, well, I'm in the beach area, I'm going to take less. You're going to sell it for whatever the market value is. And this is what we're reflecting, whatever the price of the home is worth as of October 1st, 2020.
Can I chime in? This was my question also. And I totally understand if we need to go through the process here, but my house in particular, I'm in the beach area, not on the beach. It went up about 30%. I looked at comparables, all in the relatively close area, houses that are similar square footage, similar year built, and they're not reflecting this increase. I had an appraisal done in March. It's not reflecting that increase. I know people moved in after March, but it's not reflecting it at all. So I'm not seeing it in the comps, anything close to that price per square foot. And I didn't see it on the appraisal that happened, 9 months ago.
I agree with you that all of us who have gone up 30% or more, there's no justification because the sales have not gone up 30% in price.
So if I could just interrupt a minute, I know everyone wants to talk, but I do want to make sure that the residents, and many of them are you, who did supply their questions ahead of time, that we at least get through those, and then we can open it up. I think we're getting close to it. I just want to make sure that everyone gets those questions that they submitted answered.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
I mean, I feel like that was my question. I just haven't really gotten an answer yet. So if we're doing that, it would be great.
Why is the
Ross,
land use preferred? I'm sorry?
Ross, do you want to go back to the questions and so we can get through the list? And as I mentioned earlier, we're going till 6:30. We're hoping to get through our list of questions that were supplied by many of you on the line, and then just open it up to questions at the end. And I just want to also note that I know a lot of people want to ask specific questions about their properties, but there is the formal process that every single person, not just residents in the beach area, but every single person in this town can apply for by February 19th. And email Ross Murray and you'll get on the calendar. There won't be any blocked out, no one will be blocked out from that opportunity, where you can really delve into your personal property more deeply and have those conversations. So, because I want to make sure everyone knows that. So Ross, if you could go back to the questions so that we can get through them.
Sure, I just want to make one correction. You have to fill out an application and turn the application in to get on the BAA schedule. An email won't do it. So the applications will be available in the office and online towards the end of the month.
And they'll be accessed on your website?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure to include that in the newsletter, and we'll also post it on the town website for anyone. And if anybody has any questions or has trouble with that at that point, please email me directly. Ross, when is it going to be put up?
It'll be put up towards the end of the month, probably the last week of January. We'll get the applications up. They're being redesigned a bit, One of the BAA members is working on cleaning it up and making it a little easier to complete.
I'd like to have it up sooner than the end of the month, because February 19th is when the deadline is, so I want to give people as much time. So if we could
Okay.
streamline
work
that
on it.
process. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Why is land used for parking across from Penfield Beach valued way below residence land parcels? The town lot is appraised for $200,000 per quarter acre, and we are $600 per quarter. Those two parcels are valued as a whole, and not the potential value they would have if the town decided to sell them off as lots. And even if the town sold them off as lots, they wouldn't all be on Fairfield Beach Road. Some of them would likely be on one or the other side streets. And lastly, were COVID-inflated pricing factored into the reval? We used, as I've stated, we've used the sales from October 1 of 19 through October 1 of 20. Why do the average land values decrease as you get street by street away from the beachfront, except for the immediate beachfront properties on the south side of Myron? These increase only 3.5%, while the properties on the north side increase 13%. Then on Colonial Drive, both north and south sides of the street increase 14%. That's a pretty specific question. Percentage, again, this is a percentage change question, and you really need to look at that final value. Is the final value the correct number? And if it's not, then you should take advantage of one of the appeal routes. Did the assessment consider the properties are elevated and or FEMA compliant? Yes, we did, and that was covered. There's an FCPZ field on the field card. That is where we indicate whether the property is considered FEMA compliant or not. Did the valuation consider the property is in a flood zone, and what was the method and influence? You gonna take that one, Mike?
Sure. The flood zone.
The next one, I'm sorry. Next one too, Mike, whether we distinguish between the varying FEMA flood zones.
Right. So we populated all the field cars with the flood zones from the current maps. The flood zones down in the beach area are either in a high velocity zone or there's 2 or 3 different zones. If you're direct waterfront, those houses were only compared to direct waterfront, so they all had the same flood zone. If you were across the street on the creekside properties were only compared to creekside properties. If you were located on the Fairfield Beach side east of Reef Road, where it's like Roland and Lolly and Birch and all those streets there, the flood zone there is different than the direct waterfront flood zone, even though it's in the flood zone. Those properties are compared to themselves. What I did with the land values, as you move from Fairfield Beach Road parallel, the next road, I set land values. The further away from the Fairfield Beach you are, the land value changed. And the change points I used as the parallel roads running to Fairfield Beach. For example, the first change was at Edward, and then Quincy, and then Paulding. The land values changed the further away from Fairfield Beach, because the market reflects the further away you are from the beach, the less desirable the lot is. But the flood zone is very typical in that whole area. I believe the flood zone runs all the way to the Old Post Road. And then the A zone is not in a flood zone. Nothing in these neighborhoods, I believe, is out of flood zone.
Okay. The next question had to do about 6 properties that were questioned, and this again was a percent change comparison, and you should not use percent change to judge whether the assessment is accurate or not. You really should look for similar sales. Will a rebroadcast of this meeting be available on Fair TV? I believe it will. Brenda, can you verify that? Oh, I think she stepped away. I believe it will be.
It's recorded and it will be posted on the town's website.
Thank you, Dave. How many actual sales comps per neighborhood or street were used to develop the valuation? Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, I think there was 1,090 residential sales used in the final study period.
Yeah, 1,090, but if there was areas that we had to go back further in time, we did check sales that were older and then adjusted those sales. A lot of times we had condominium projects that didn't have sales or that were current when we had to go back in time and then look at kind of adjust them based on time.
Where can we see the comps used to get to the valuation? They can all be searched on vgsi.com, the website that hosts all the field cards. You can link to that off of the Fairfield website or my site on that same place. Based on the assessment of my house.
Could you repeat that site?
It's a rather long link, but it is vgsi.com is the main page, and you can navigate to Fairfield from there. There's
Why
links
don't you
off
post the link in the chat?
I did already. You'll see. I posted it. It says https gis.vgsi.com/FairfieldCT. I'll post it again right now in case somebody didn't see it prior.
Based on the assessment of my house, unless there is a 14 to 15% reduction in mill rate, my taxes will go up 18%. How is the town addressing that? Brenda, if you want to address that? I mean, I don't.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it says based on the revaluation, they anticipate their taxes will go up 18% if there's no change in the mill rate. How is the town addressing that? I'll just say one thing. Right now it looks like the real estate portion of the grand list is up over 7%. So in all likelihood, that'll result in a reduced mill rate. That's why we tell you don't use the current mill rate, because it's very likely to be different.
Right, and that's something we're going to be looking at. We're just starting the budget process now, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
How is the value of the improvements derived? I know what it costs to build this house, and the value is $200,000 too high.
So I could talk to that point. The way that the values of the improvements that are put into the CAMA system are derived, I talked to a lot of local builders about what it's costing to build different style homes, and I also research different physical characteristics of homes cost. For example, like what a generator or what bathrooms or garages, and the cost to build these things. I have a good sense of what construction costs are, especially in the beach area, what construction costs are. These numbers are put into the model. I could give and then what you're putting in here most likely doesn't include entrepreneurial profit. The market and the real estate market does include that. In the end, the values of your houses that are being assessed is really what the market value is. It's not really the cost value. The way it's derived is through a modified cost approach because we need to have land value and then add the improvements to the land value. But the overall value is a market-derived value from sales.
What generally accepted mass appraisal methods were used in this revaluation? We followed the state statutes which outline how we have to do a reval and the standards we have to meet. And those standards model the International Association of Assessing Officers model, which is used, throughout the world. What specific assumptions, methodologies, or data weighting did you employ in the beach area? For example, it appears municipal valuations generally gave properties located closer to the beach a much higher appraisal than properties located closer to town, even when sales data does not substantiate that assumption. Our analysis indicated that properties closer to the beach do sell for more. And this would be a case if you have a specific house and comps that dictate that the value be lowered, we'll certainly take a look at it and make the change. Did municipal valuations use statistical thresholds to trigger a more in-depth review of a property? For example, would a 20% difference in a property value versus its recent sales price as noted above, or in 2015, or the 2015 appraisal trigger this more in-depth review? All the sales in the study period and back to January were reviewed. Mike, you could elaborate on what you do to review them.
So when we review all the sales, what we do is we take a look at the individual property, we drive by it, and then I compare it to what the field card has for characteristics. The other thing I take a look at is we're members of the multiple listing service. I pull the listing on the home that at the time of sale to make sure the physical characteristics that they were proposing in the sale match what the town's field card has. You'll see updates that have been made to the house. You'll see additions, sometimes not physical additions on the outside because permits would have to be made, but in the inside, if they added hardwood flooring or if they added upgraded moldings or if it's recently been a new kitchen was put in or the bathrooms have been updated. If those characteristics are different than what is on the field card, we'll make those changes prior to putting the sales information into the model.
Is it possible that your assumptions and methodologies could be flawed and that all properties in Fairfield were not properly and uniformly assessed? We don't believe so. The model is, our methodologies are widely used. This is not something that's used just in Fairfield. It's used, across the country. The same type of methodology to come up with values. So we have no reason to believe that it is flawed. And we're almost there. What is the average increase in assessed value for beach resident homes, not the increase in the total assessed value for all beach homes combined? I'm not sure exactly what this person was looking for, but the average increase for the beach area was 19.6%, I believe. I believe that's what it was. What is the average increase or decrease for all other Fairfield areas? Again, not the change for all homes combined in each area. So the overall change in the real estate grand list was increased by 7.4%. Will there be a change in the mill rate? We discussed this before. yes, the mill rate should change based on the final net taxable grand list and the amount of the budget that needs to be, the amount of budget that needs to come from taxes. The grand list, by the way, includes the real estate, it includes motor vehicles, and it includes business personal property. All available public data shows real estate appreciation of no more than 7 to 8% over the last 5 years. What data do you have that supports appraisals growing 25 to 30% in the beach area? It comes back to the sales data that we've used. That's where we're getting our increases from. Prior to May of 20, the beach area real estate market had been in a slow, steady decline for at least the prior 18 months, with many houses sitting on the market for over 2 years. How do you justify a 25 to 30% increase in property value from May 20 to October 20? Mike, you might want to elaborate, but again, we are using the sales from the study period, October 1 of 19 through October of 20.
I don't agree with the question. I don't believe that the real estate market in the beach area has been declining over the last 18 months. We've been doing appraisals in the beach area prior to even working on the revaluation. The beach area has been increasing. It did see a decrease back in 2012 and 13 after Sandy, but from 2015, where it kind of started to level out, starting in 16 and 17, we've seen the beach area rising. Over the last few years, the beach area has really been taking off. It's one of the premier and prominent areas in Fairfield to live. So it's being reflected in what prices of homes have been selling for.
It is unfortunate for all taxpayers that the 5-year revaluation period happened to fall in the middle of a global pandemic that has artificially raised property values. Since the market will return to its pre-pandemic state by late summer of 21, how do you justify taxing homeowners for the next 5 years on artificially inflated prices that will exist for only 8 to 12 months? Well, there's no way to know what the actual market will do in the next year, 2 years, or 5 years. The revaluation is mandated by state. We don't have a choice. It needs to get performed.
And the state dictates the exact date and time that the valuation has to be done as of, and that's October 1st, 2020. You're not allowed to postpone the revaluations. Towns have tried this year unsuccessfully. We actually were involved with Hamden. They tried to postpone unsuccessfully, creating a problem where they didn't start the revaluation until almost the mid-summer when they found out they had to have it done. So it's very difficult to postpone revaluations. There's huge penalties the town would have to inquire about.
Question was, how much does the town pay for the revaluation? The cost of the revaluation is $215,000, and we paid an additional $38,000 to have new street level images taken. I did not have time. I got a few questions late. I did not have a time to give detailed answers to these, but they involved who was involved in the process and the names of everybody. This went through the normal town process. We created a RFP, a request for proposal, that went out into the market. We had 4 companies bid on that, return their proposals. The 4 companies were Municipal Valuations, Vision Appraisal, Tyler Technologies, and Ryan. And ultimately, through the process of that we went through, Municipal Valuations was picked. We actually were close to that decision right at the time of the election, and we held off making a decision until the new administration was in place, and ultimately brought the results to the new administration and went ahead with municipal valuation.
Ross,
And I just wanted
these are my
to
questions.
say that the Board of Selectmen voted to approve of the company that was chosen by the RFP process. And that's really the only requirement in the state statute.
Ross, the rest of those questions are mine. You've already answered them.
Thank you. I think we're all set here. Mike, I'm having a little trouble with the chat window because I tried to have a video going and I failed on that.
So I have the chat window open. I'm gonna answer some of the questions in the chat window that I feel were not touched upon and maybe need more clarification. I'm starting. Some of the questions here is what's a more extraordinary event than the pandemic? There was a lot of questions saying, could we omit the sales due to the pandemic? Why are we including sales that are in the COVID time? The state statute is very clear on how we have to do revaluations. We have to look at sales that are from October 1st of 2019 to October 1st of 2020. All the sales that have taken place after March of 2020 were affected by the pandemic. And it's really what the market value as is a certain time, which is October 1st. So you can't eliminate 70 or 80% of the sales because it would not be reflective of what the real estate market is as of October 1st, 2020.
And on the flip side, if the market was declining, we wouldn't be eliminating low sales.
Exactly. And a good example would be that if we had Sandy happened in July or August and the beach area got decimated again, you would not eliminate the new sales of homes down there either.
I do see a question here on, they asked, what is BAA or is it VAA? It is BAA, Board of Assessment Appeals. The board is an elected body. There's 5 elected members, and this year the town has added 4 additional members to help with the expected volume. That increase was planned a year ago. We were anticipating, a higher volume in a revaluation year. They meet in March, and your appeal has to be submitted in writing to my office by February 19th, and we'll make those forms available. We'll do that as soon as we can.
Another one of the questions is, did you account for the impact of college students as renters in the beach area? We did. The college students or the people purchasing homes in the beach area. The market reflects that. The buyers of homes know where they're purchasing their property. They've already taken that into consideration when making offers on properties. And the sellers have also taken that into consideration when they're accepting these offers. So the college students, depending on where the property is located, if it's affecting that property, the buyer and seller have taken that into consideration. And we also look at location of sales compared to the properties that didn't sell. So when I'm setting the land value, different areas along the beach or in the beach area have had different land values attributed to that. So this is all reflective in those numbers. The other question that I see is how do you reflect seasonal house that's not winterized in the valuation versus a full 4-season house? Again, you should look at your field card. If the house is non-winterized or it's seasonal, you should, in the informal hearing, let somebody know that. We'll make sure that the physical characteristics of the home reflects the seasonal house rather than it being a full 4-season house. Other questions? Can you exclude COVID months in your sales? I answered that. The answer is no. One of the questions, how can you compare original beach homes in the area to enormous houses that builders are selling for $2 million plus? We're not. We're not comparing a house that is built in the 1940s, hasn't had any work done to it, to a house that's built in 2019. They're two different types of homes. They have two different grades put to them. They have different depreciation attributed to them. They have different characteristics within the building. They're totally different animals here. Is the revaluation exclusively based on resale? It's exclusively based on sales. So I guess that's what they mean by resale.
I'll jump in here, Mike. There's a question about the success rate of going to the informals and the BAA and ultimately to Superior Court. I don't have any exact figures on that, but I would say that generally by the time someone gets to Superior Court, they're not going to go that far unless they really believe they have a case and have good supporting evidence. And unfortunately, sometimes that evidence doesn't get flushed out until they get to Superior Court. Otherwise, we probably could have resolved it earlier. And the success is really based on having good supporting evidence.
Another question, why can't you turn over the assessment manual now? It can't be completed till the jobs could be completed because adjustments are still being made that come out of the informal meetings. And I think that's the majority of questions. A lot of the other ones have been asked and answered. So unless there's any other immediate questions, I think we're going to conclude the question and answer session part of this.
I have a question because
someone asked how you get a field card, Ross. Is the card different from what?
Yeah, I posted the link.
Yep,
Sorry?
you can go to the town. Yep, you can go to the town website, and there's links to VGSI from there. And then, as Mike said, he posted the link in the chat box. So simply, it's vgsi.com, and then you'll have to navigate to Fairfield from there because they do host many other towns in the region. Or there's, again, a direct link right off the site.
Ross, I believe those
the VGSI website that you posted for us to see how our house was compared to the sale. The sales portion of that website does not work, and it says it has no data. So how are we going to find out what you compared our homes with?
Let me double check that right now because the last time I was on it, it was functioning.
And can you just go to, in the meantime, Ross, when you're looking that up, a Jan C asked, after you finish answering that, and asked to inquire about why both their questions were not answered. Jan, as soon as Ross has answered that, would you just answer your ask your two questions that you didn't have answered?
I checked the website, that sales function is working right now.
Yeah, I just did it also, and I was able to pull up sales. Yeah, you do have to select a model, residential, condo, commercial condo, and you do have to select at least one style of house. Otherwise, you won't get results. But you should also use the other refinements to drill down to what you focus in more on your house. I would usually start with a much broader search, and then if you get a good number of results, keep narrowing that down until you get down to 5 or 6 good comps, and then pick the best 2 or 3 from there.
How do we get the condition cards? Because condition adjustments, because they're not on those field cards.
Let me take a look. It is on the card. You would look in the building information section, and the depreciation is listed as building percent good. So for instance, I'm looking at Town Hall, it's listed as percent good as 66%, so that equates to a 34% depreciation.
I'm not asking about depreciation, I'm asking a condition adjustment for land.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ross, the online version does not have that condition factor on it.
Okay, I do have some control over what's displayed. I will look into that and see if I can put that display up. Other than that, you'd have to get a card from my office.
Ross, we could send that out to everyone who's on here through the FBRA or the Peninsula organization, which I think a lot of you are members of, when you have that, Ross, when you've done that.
Yeah, I have to see if I'll check and see if it's possible, and if it is, I'll make that change and let you know so we can get the message out.
Okay. So Jan C., you had a couple of questions that weren't answered. Would you like to ask them? Jan C. on the chat?
I would. Can you hear me?
Sure, yes. Go right ahead.
Okay, thanks. So having had an informal hearing, I had a question on that process. And my question is, why does the informal hearing process utilize interviewers that are by self-admission not qualified to evaluate the hearing information or provide a recommendation on the necessary adjustments? They simply listen and they indicate that they're going to pass along the information to the residential appraiser, who will then make any decision. But why even have the hearing? This seems to lessen the ability of the taxpayer to explain their case and information directly to the person who's going to evaluate and verify the supportability of that claim. The informal hearing process should be one where the material is explained directly to the individual making the decision, and at a minimum, people should understand the current deficiency. In other words, I think people go into these hearings thinking that they're explaining the information to somebody who may actually do something about it. So I think it should be changed. I'm sure that there are many communities and companies that do it this way, but I don't think that we should strive to be like other communities. We should strive to be better than other communities, not just doing the same thing wrong. Sorry it was so long.
Mike, can you address that?
First of all, the informal hearing process, the people taking the information are qualified to take down all the notes. We have forms that they fill out here that, and then all the information that is sent in is all put into a package. That is given to an appraiser who's our supervisor of the job. The supervisor will sort through all of them, and the more complicated properties or the ones that need special attention and the ones in the beach area are all passed along to myself, who takes a look at all of them and makes the adjustment. It would be physically impossible for one person to do every single hearing and have an in-depth conversation with the property owner on how the valuation was completed. When you get to the level of, but it is possible for me to take a look at all the information that is sent over and make adjustments. So I take a
So,
look
Mike,
at every single one of these properties that are sent over where there's a case to be made for a valuation change.
So Mike, can I ask just a follow-up question? So for example, if someone in that instance you said couldn't answer the question directly to the resident, are they told an appraiser is going to look this over and get back to you with additional information, or how does that work?
So the way the informal hearing works is if you sent in information to support your position, that information will be given to the appraiser. The appraiser then will take a look at what is in the town record to see if there's a change that needs to be made or a value that needs to be adjusted. If it's a special case, it could get elevated to a person that is higher, which would be myself or Chris Karen, or we have a couple other MAI appraisers here that are partners in the business. They take a look at these properties and make the adjustment. But every single hearing, you can be assured that somebody is taking a look at the information that you're sending over. If you're just having a hearing and saying, well, I'm not happy that my value has gone up and make a change, most likely you're not going to see anything done because you've given us no information. But if you had a hearing and you sent over, for example, one of the questions before was about conservation easements and half the property being impacted by wetlands, and you sent over a map to show that, and that wasn't reflected on the card, we will make those changes for you because we want to have the information correct.
May
And I'll
I
add to that holds true right through the BAA process. You know, if you have good supporting evidence, you're much more likely to be successful.
So there's no doubt in my mind that the information eventually gets to an appraiser. My question is the validity of the process of the 15 minutes. So I brought a lot of data. I spent 15 minutes going through it. The person I asked at the end of the conversation, will you make a recommendation? And the person said, no, I'm not an appraiser, nor am I qualified to make any recommendation. All I do is forward the information along and, you know, write down anything further that you may have said in addition to the information. So I'm wondering, why did I even bother to do that? The process is flawed.
It's
and
not
maybe
flawed.
there's not enough money. Maybe there's not enough money to have. I certainly would never expect one individual to conduct all of these informal hearings, but I would expect somebody competent to conduct the informal hearings, because otherwise they're worthless.
Well, no, they're competent in taking down the information and passing it on to somebody who's going to review that information. I'm sure that if you sent over information and paperwork and comps and all that stuff, I will take a look at it and make an adjustment if I feel it's warranted. We're not going to just take down information and throw it to the side and nobody else is going to look at it.
No, nor would I expect you to, but I think the process is flawed. I don't think people understand that they're speaking to somebody who's just, you know, a note taker. I personally don't think.
Well, they're actually more than note takers. They're field people. There are people who, they're the employees that work for us that are out in the field that day to day do data collection for us. So they're very well versed in acquiring data, putting data down so it could be adjusted. But the process of our company, I don't want other people making adjustments on my values without my input. So they're not going to have a say in what the value should be changed to. The only person who's going to have a say in the final analysis is myself, because at the end of the day, I have to, and Ross has to, sign the grand list, and I have to sign the paperwork to the state that I certified the job. So
Brenda,
I'm
I'd
not
like
going to
to
leave it up to
ask
somebody
you
else
at
to
another
change.
time.
Can I just time out? Can I just ask for everyone's, knowledge base? So in the instance that Jan brings up, she gives the information for 15 minutes. There isn't a determination made in that case. Is that resident then told, someone is going to get back to you in X amount of time, to give you a final answer? Is that happening, or what is exactly happening in those instances?
So the way it works is we take the information, and the taxpayer or the property owner is told that they'll be receiving a change notice within the next several weeks, whether it's up or down or stays the same. If they're not happy at that time, there's another process beyond that where they could go to the Board of Assessment Appeals. They're never told that the person who's they're talking to has the authority to make any changes.
So everyone is told
Brenda, it's
after
been
their,
a couple weeks and no one has gotten their letters.
Because the job isn't completed yet, so I can't send the letters out until,
You just said that a letter would be getting to you in a couple of weeks on the determination, and they haven't.
okay, Jan, can you just give me a moment, please? Because I want to make sure everyone or Dina, I just want to make sure everyone understands this process. So these cards only went out a couple of weeks ago. So obviously it may take more than 2 weeks, could take 3 weeks. I just want everyone to know, and I want to know, that when people have their hearing and they're told you're going to be getting a card in the mail in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, so that you can then know if that was a successful informal hearing or if you have to go through the formal process. Is that correct, Mike?
correct. So if you had a hearing in the beginning and you were told you'll hear it in a few weeks, that was true because the hearings were supposed to end by the end of the month. We extended the hearings further, so they're going to end on the 15th. That's the hard stop date because the assessor's office needs time to put the grand list together. At that time, we'll make all our adjustments, and the letters will be sent out to give ample time for everybody to receive them and to make an application to the Board of Assessment Appeals if they're not happy with their results. The Board of Assessment Appeals doesn't need to have the letter in until, I believe it's February 19th. So the grand list gets signed on January 30th, or you'll have ample time.
So Mike, for everyone's knowledge base here, when is the hard, like, if you haven't gotten any response back in whatever amount of time, or does everyone get a card or some kind of letter from the company if they did an informal hearing?
If you did an informal hearing, you should receive a letter, probably by the end of the first week of February by the latest. If you haven't, you should either give our office a call or give the assessor's office a call, and we could look into it for you. But if you don't hear by the end of the first week of February, give our office a call. You have the number is on the form, or you could look it up. We're right here in Fairfield.
Well, I'll include that in the newsletter, all that information, and Jackie will touch base with you and Ross to make sure we have all the details, and so we can share that with residents and they understand that they should be getting a card if they had an informal hearing. If they don't get it by this date, what they need to do next.
Hi, this is Kara. I think this was a great point that this caller brought up. I think it's about streamlining the process and empowering our community to know exactly what we need to provide and who we need to provide it for. And I think instead of having these 15-minute conversations where someone's taking notes down, if we instead had either a portal that we provide the data and our town provides us with criteria of what we should provide, so everyone has the same opportunity to clearly state their case of why we feel that the assessment is not correct, that it would give a good guideline for everyone. And we would take this middle, person out of the mix and provide consistent data to be reviewed.
The answer is, this is the way it's done in every community. There's only a certain amount of time. Everybody's case is different. So not everyone, you can't have a cookie cutter form just to fill out. Within the letter that we sent you, we say send all the information that is pertinent. We do a lot of revaluations throughout the state of Connecticut. We get everything. We get pictures, we get appraisals, we get sales contracts, we get a plethora of different items, and everybody thinks something is important, they send it out. We have the ability where we gave an email address where it could be sent, we gave a fax number where everything could be sent, and if it wasn't the pandemic time, these hearings typically were done in person. So you would have a hearing date, you would go to a location in the town hall, and you would sit with the person, and you would put your case on. Since we don't have that ability due to COVID, we have to do it electronically and do the conversation over the phone. So it's a little bit more impersonal this year, but this is all we could provide due to the fact that we're dealing with a disease where we're not allowed to have contact with the public.
So Mike, can I just add that I think it's really important that people get, you make an effort to get people their responses back, because the deadline to apply is the 19th, obviously. So for example, if a handful or how many ever people don't get a response back, then they have to call and go get and everything, and then they're getting close to their point to be able to. Well, I don't know. I want to make sure everybody gets their cards, but do they have to supply a whole bunch of information just to schedule to get on the Board of Assessment Appeal, or do they just have to just submit their name?
There's a form that they would complete. It's got a few mandatory questions, nothing too complicated, what they think the value is. We do ask them to submit their backup with that so that it can be delivered to the BAA ahead of time. That doesn't always happen, but it is a written form, and it does need to be submitted to the office.
Okay, so what I'm going to recommend then is that, anyone who hasn't gotten a card back by at least February 1st is to just put your name on that list, and then inquire with municipal evaluations or the tax assessor. You always take your name off the list if you did get a letter back that says they accepted what you said and your evaluation went down. But I would just recommend everybody, because I don't want anybody to be locked out of the system.
Right. The other thing you can do is you can look at the VGSI site, because that will get updated. That's updated once a week, and it's done on Fridays.
So, Ross, will you share that with us so we can put that in the newsletter too, just to make sure everything's really clear for everyone, they understand how this works? Sure.
Yep.
Thank you. And I see Dorothea's been waiting patiently. Dorothea, do you want to? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Dorothea. Can't hear you.
Thank you. Thought I clicked it. Two things. One, that it would be helpful if the entire tax card were put online, not just the condition adjustments, but it ought to be the same card that's available within the department so that we can all operate. The other, in some ways, it seems that the process has argued sort of the factors being applied to a particular property, and that, you know, it's a question of whether that's appropriate to that property and that valuation. So I don't quite get why we need to wait for every hearing to be finished before adjustments can start to come out on the existing ones. The logic, I can't compute that logic.
To answer your question, for us, the operation, it's much easier for us to send them all out at once. That ensures that everything has been sent. I have to write a computer script that pulls the information out of the CAMA system. It's done based on dates. I don't want to miss somebody, so it's much easier for us to do it all at one time. The other thing I just wanted to make clear, if people, after hearing this presentation today, feel that, wow, I had a hearing and I didn't give some information that I should have, send it over now. You have the email address, or you could fax it over. And just make sure you put your PID, that you want to add this to the informal hearing that you had on whatever date that it was. We'll add it to the file and take a look at it. We want to make sure that everybody has been heard. Make sure that you include all the backup that you have. If you have characteristics that need to be changed and you want to take pictures of them to show the condition of something, or something exists or doesn't exist, and put that in there also. It's great to have with this digital age that you could send a bunch of pictures over. If you have comparable sales that you feel that are very comparable to your house that you want to be considered, we'll take a look at it. If you had an appraisal done for refi in the last year or two, send that over to us. All this information helps with the process.
And I just want to clarify, someone did write that they thought that that the process started on February 19th for the BAA. That's the deadline to get your name in the queue, not the end of the appeal process. So I just want to make sure that's clear for everyone. And I want to thank everyone. I know this is I've gotten a lot of various feedback across town. There are people who are happy with their reval, believe it or not, there's a lot. And then there's people who are not, and I get that. And I know that COVID, people are concerned that that has an impact, and the Board of Assessment members are residents in our town. They get that there's been an impact, and I think there's been an impact up and down for everybody. There are areas of our town, I've been told by the tax assessor, who were paying a very high assessment from the last assessment unjustly, and they were paying a high rate, and now they were leveled off, and there's people who are now going up a little. Believe me, I've heard from a lot of beach residents who said their rates didn't go up very much at all. So I know it's not comforting to hear that, but I think there's a dichotomy here, and I'm hoping very much so that the Board of Assessment Appeals, and I will share that I think they need to look at the big picture and the impact of the pandemic on how this might have impacted when they make their determination. But I think that process is going to be a good one for all of our residents. And I apologize if people didn't get into the informal hearings, but again, I want to reiterate that the formal hearings no one will be locked out of them. Everyone will have that opportunity. So I just want to make sure that you knew that, and please feel free to reach out to the tax assessor's office or municipal evaluations. And if you have any questions that you don't feel are being answered or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me at firstselectwoman@fairfieldct.org or call the office.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And my chief of staff is typing in the my email address for anybody who wants that. And we're going to put additional information in the newsletter too, so have people understand this as clearly as possible. All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, have a good night. Take care.